Hi, I'm Ken and I lead the Growth Lab here at Google. We focus on helping product teams increase user acquisition, user engagement, and user retention by providing insights, best practices, services, and tools. Basically, we help product teams grow their products. There are a few key principles of growth to keep in mind, and those are what I'd like to cover today. Before we get into the actual principles, what I'd like to do is talk about growth itself. Growth is not a series of clever hacks. It's not about finding some magic silver bullet. It's not about finding a killer feature that's going to accelerate your growth dramatically. What it is an iterative, data-driven process that you can run again and again and again, and it will result in great products that deliver more value to more users more often. I guarantee if you follow the growth process, you will get growth. You may get a little bit, you may get a lot, but you will get growth. When we start talking about the principles, the first one is that you need to define your North Star metric. This is a metric that answers the question, how do we define success for our product? How do we know that we're delivering more value to our users? It's one metric that should reflect all changes that are made throughout any stage of the user funnel. So if you improve user acquisition, you should see that reflected in the North Star metric. Or if you improve engagement or retention, that should be reflected in this metric as well. As a couple examples, look at Facebook. Their goal is to drive community. They want to build a community and focus on having them interact as much as possible. So for them, their North Star metric is daily active users. It's measuring on a daily basis how many people in that community are active on that day. Or a second one, Airbnb. They're focused on taking people who have a room to rent and matching them up with people who want to rent the room. And the more they can do that, the more nights will be booked. So those are just a couple examples of the types of North Star metrics that really capture what everyone on those products and in those companies is focusing on. One other comment, avoid using revenue as your North Star metric. It really is a lagging indicator. What you want is some kind of metric that is much more of a leading indicator of your product success. The second principle is you want to focus on retention before acquisition. And this is exactly the opposite of what most product teams do when they launch a feature or launch a new product. They try and focus on how many users can we acquire as quickly as possible. The problem with that is all products are like a leaky bucket. You pour users in and they fall out the bottom. Now, what you want to do before doubling down on acquisition is fix those holes as much as possible. Otherwise, you're going to pour more and more users in, you're going to just lose more and more users. So the way you know that you have fixed enough of the holes in your leaky bucket is when your retention curve flattens out, as we've shown here on this slide. This tells you that at some point, you have a sustained set of users who are pretty well retained from the initial set who started using it. When it flattens, that's when you know you've got good product market fit. The question about where it flattens is a little less relevant because that is heavily influenced by how you define retention. So rather than focusing on where it flattens, just make sure it gets flat, and then we can focus on moving it up and up and up. The third principle is about the first mile of your product, when a user first uses your application, and getting that right. The reason why this is so critically important is on average, you'll lose at least 70% of your users in the first 3 to 7 days. So you don't want to focus just on onboarding, which is kind of the first user experience. You want to focus on a broader concept of activation, which is getting the user to a stage where they are engaged or where they are a converted paying customer. So as an example here, we've got Google Drive. On the left, they were focusing mostly on onboarding and showing people the different features that the app has. Now the problem is most people just skipped right through that. So it really wasn't adding any value. Instead, what they did was change that by first removing that because it wasn't very useful, and second, focusing on those things that were highly correlated to retention. So getting users to upload a file is highly correlated to retention in Google Drive. So we wanted to focus that as soon as you open the app, you see a picture of what you see, and it's telling you to upload a file. So that is really focusing on getting them to an activation state. Another part of getting users activated is understanding what your magic moments are in an app. There can be multiple of them. These are the moments where there's an aha moment for the user, where they understand the fun and they understand the uniqueness of this and they understand the value of the app, so they'll keep coming back. As an example, let's take a look at Google Photos. The aha moment, one of many, is when you first do a search for something like dog, as we've shown here, and it comes up with all these pictures of your dog, but you've never tagged any of these photos as having your dog in it. The app just did it for you. So that is something where you say, wow, I've never seen this before. This is really valuable to me. It's not just showing me photos, it's actually helping me find photos that would be really hard for me to find otherwise. So once you understand what your magic moments are, really what activation is about is getting users to those magic moments as quickly as possible. Fourth principle is thinking about growth as a game of inches. What I mean by that is the successful apps that have consistent growth really focus on many, many small wins, many small growth wins versus one huge home run. Most companies don't have that incredible inflection point where something changed in the app and suddenly they had enormous growth. It's usually step by step, getting a little bit better in terms of acquisition and engagement and retention. And there are hundreds of ways you can do that within your app. If you just look for the smaller places that you can tweak and improve rather than we need to come up with this new home run feature. So here's an example with search. At the top is what originally happened if you were in an area where there wasn't good cell connectivity. It just told you, sorry, I can't help you. On the bottom, that's been changed to say, sorry, I can't help you right now, but I'll keep trying in the background, and when I am connected, I'll send you a notification so you know to come back. And just that small change in how we handle a state where you're not connected to the internet drove a 0.5% increase in overall daily active users for search. Fifth principle is focusing on driving your users to discover the great features you already have rather than always trying to think of building new features. You have a lot of great features that I guarantee are underutilized. Find those and then help people discover them and use them. So 3 things to think about. 1, raise the awareness of those features. You can see on the left here that in search, we know that people who use sports score information and look up sports score information or looking up entertainment information tend to be more engaged because that information changes often. But a lot of people don't know about those features. So here are the types of things you can do to help just raise the awareness that these features exist. The second thing you want to do is add more entry points. So for people who do know that they can get sports information or entertainment information or weather information, how do we make it as easy as possible for them to get to that information? So what we've got in the middle example here are some tap targets that you just tap on those and it takes you immediately to that information. We just made it easier to find the front door to those features. And the last one is promoting the features in context. When you launch a new feature, don't just announce it when they first open the app. That tends to not be very effective. Find where they will most be interested in using that feature. Like here, what we've got an example is in Maps, they have a pit stop feature, which if you're navigating from point A to point B, it can help you find places for food and gas. The best place to help people become aware of that feature is right when they're starting a navigation, when it would be most useful for them. The 6th point I want to focus on is that when you're thinking about growth and you're thinking about what features to build in your product, focus on your worst users and not your best. What I mean by that is focus on the needs of your least engaged users, not your power users. If we look at this curve, this is showing the engagement levels of the people using your product. It shows how many people are using it 1 day a month, or 2 days a month, or 3 days, 4 days, etc. And this is a pretty common curve. We've got a lot of people at both ends and fewer in the middle. That's fairly common shape. The reason you don't really want to focus on your best users first is that they're already on the right side of this curve here. They're not going anywhere. They're not going to churn. You're not going to lose them. And the second point is, if I take someone who's already at 25 days a month and I increase their usage to 27 days a month by adding some power feature, well, in this example, that's only an 8% increase in their usage levels. Whereas if I focus on someone who's only using the product 2 days a month and focus on what their needs are to drive more usage for them, and I apply those same incremental 2 days to them, it goes from 2 to 4. That's a 100% increase in their engagement levels. And you'll find that as you get to products that are more mature, usually growth is driven by increasing retention and decreasing churn rather than increasing acquisition. So focus on the ones who are most marginal, who are least engaged and most likely to churn. The final point is that growth begins and ends with data. I said early on that growth is an iterative, data-driven process. And what I mean by that is it's not just something where you use data at the end to figure out whether a new feature you launched helped you grow. You use data throughout the entire growth process. You start with this understand phase where you're looking at data to figure out who are your users, where are they coming from, what are they doing in your app, how engaged are they? And then you're using that data to identify growth opportunities. Are there particularly great features that are highly retaining and highly engaging, but not many people are using them? That's one such thing that you can identify in terms of something you should focus on for growth. And the last thing is you then take those ideas and you run experiments based on them. And don't just run an experiment once. Iterate on it multiple times. If it doesn't work, keep iterating to see if you can get it to work. If it does work, keep iterating to see if you can optimize it. And you're again using data here to close out the final part of the process. And then you're starting again. And now we've got a new product. Where can I use data to identify new opportunities? So these are some key principles that I think will help you be successful in your growth initiatives. And now that you understand them, the next thing to do is to understand and learn about the growth process and the growth tools that are available to you. Thank you.